This kid is catching catfish out of here. I've seen catfish in here before, but I didn't know that people used to catch them. Matter of fact, he caught one earlier. And there's no bait on the hook. Odd. But there he's got one. Ugh. Well, the clouds are there. All over today. The clouds are everywhere today. Spread out across the sky. But it has rained already. Hopefully I can complete my walk before it rains again. Greetings all, greetings. My view of the world. Physically. People going to work. Wow. The chickens, I mean, right, inspecting his chickens, make sure they're healthy. Anyway, here, like everywhere in the world, the stock market, or news, I should say, don't affect the daily lives of people. They're going about their lives the way they did yesterday, the day before. Crazy, isn't it? Without hesitation. The news here, it's not, there is a little bit of news about what's happening there, but otherwise it's all about what's happening here and in Asia. This guy shows, you walk through the neighborhood also. I'm sitting on sitting out front in the morning making a video, and he's walking by. But the events you see happening are what people call are looking for, really, I should say. People looked at those events and they gave it, they said this is what the end point of all this is going to be. They call it Black Swan. Your book called it End Times, because end times meaning that these things are cycle. happens many times. End of times. And those times normally go in cycles like 2000. Anyway, part of that cycle begins with the Roman Empire, which was built on the remains of another cycle. When the Romans picked up the mantle of leadership of their side of the world and brought it to Europe, because it was centered in Africa. Now, the Greeks came, got their education from the Africans. They added to it, and then pretended that nobody else was involved in it, just them. A few of them did admit that, hey, I got this knowledge from Africa. But this new generation we have now, last 2,000 years, I would say the last 1,000 years, they're the one who decided to, you know what, we came up with all of this. And Africa had nothing to do with it. So Rome, with this powerful army, came to Europe and began what was the foundation of their modern world. When the Roman Empire died, the church, the Roman church, took over and kept order. Because all of the Europeans fought against each other. Yeah, the Vikings, if you know history, they would just go wherever they want on their side of the world. And then you go that history, you know, developed where the civilized, what they call the civilized peoples of Europe that learned from the Romans, because the Romans used to take people from whatever area they conquered, brought them to Rome, put them in their army, trained them to become Romans. But then when the rebellion started and Rome broke up, and these people who didn't settle in Rome went back to their countries and started building. Every country now is fighting to become the next Rome. Fast forward now to the Germans and the British, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, Portuguese. And they're sitting around the periphery of the Muslims in Spain. And they finally get an army that is capable of defeating the Muslims. The fight between them starts again. But this time, they came up with a plan devised by somebody else now, that they're gonna trade with China. And in instead of going across Africa that the trade route followed, instead of giving the Muslims their money, the Portuguese started moving out around the world with the help of the people who used to rule Portugal and Spain at one time. And Portugal went around Africa, and there they learned about the African slave trade. They learned about the African slave trade. That Africans would take each other to work in their fields after a war free. And they got a couple of those slaves and brought them back to Portugal. Fast forward to where Columbus blowing off course, ending up in the Caribbean, or so they said. But we know it's different. They had a map that showed, Anyway, supposedly blowing off course, end up in the Caribbean, found these islands and heard about these stories about gold. But we know the stories about gold didn't start with Columbus. The stories about gold in the Caribbean and South America was coming to Africa long because the Africans were going there. Anyway, the slave trade got expanded to South America. And then into North America. Because you got another dynamic now coming out of Holland. And they want to build up America. They knew America was there because they've been coming and going a long time, but didn't have the ability to conquer and run the place. They couldn't survive in the land. After they started the slavery in America, the war between them started up for the land that they had just found, just came to take over. And another dynamic was the ownership of the land. So the American Constitution now, these people who wrote the American Constitution, they were educated in Greek, Roman. They saw the Indian operation because the Indians, remember, taught them how to survive in the Americas. And the Africans also taught them. So they have this philosophy that it says, let's try a new thing. And they negotiated with each other, came up with the rules, and created the American Corporation. The American Corporation. It finally developed into what people are calling a country, but it began as a corporation and still exists as a corporation today. Built on economics and military power and the land. But they couldn't survive unless they had free labor. Too many of them were dying. And into that came the African free labor. You can see where today you got a similar situation to what existed then. And robotics and AI, they're trying to raise that up quickly to get that slave labor, because what they call capitalism cannot exist without slave labor. They went to China to get the cheapest product, which is slave labor. South America, they're using slave labor. The plantations that they own everywhere in the world where the capitalist corporate form of government exists is built on slavery. So today, fast running out of slaves because people have taken the technology that we talked about, and now they are saying we using the same robotics of making what was made in America, or what America was making in their country, in China, Vietnam, wherever they were, India. These people are taking robotics and making what America used to make cheaper. And now they're taking over the production, and then they are now selling to America instead of America bringing the product from them to America. Here's a situation where the British was in, the Romans were in. Everybody that goes through this situation come to the same conclusion. "50 years maybe, a little over 50 years ago, one of the think tanks in America said, look, things are changing, and they projected it. As a matter of fact, people were telling them, beware of China, beware of moving to Africa and China, because when you transfer your technology, these people are going to overtake you, and you become the slave too." They were being warned. But they figured that they can get China on their side against what they were calling at the time the Soviet Union. Because the Soviet Union, they didn't have a very strong economy, but they had a military that was compatible to the U.S. Europe was destroyed after World War II. So now the U.S. had created an organization called NATO, and they were working on the EU to keep those people from fighting each other, keep stability in Europe, so that America can rule over a stable Europe, and they can always go into the rest of the world with their army. And America don't want to fight a war in Europe against its own people. But the rest of the world now, they send their army anywhere to destroy or whatever, and they can rebuild it there. So they created this thing called NATO. So as the rest of the world start to grow up, America finds itself in a position where its army now cannot cannot enforce everything that they want to enforce. So they started building up Europe, start forcing the Europeans to spend more on their military in order for NATO now to become a worldwide organization. So now you have this military wing that's going to help America enforce any kind of rule that they make up to keep the rest of the world going the way they want it to go. But the economy is falling apart. Americans' military is falling apart, and they realize that. The plan devised that they came up with, America for another century, put the dollar in charge of the world economy. Because if your dollar is trading, everybody's spending the dollar, they can't raise up their currency, strengthen their currency. And for a while the Chinese did that. The Russians did it because they were benefiting from it. I don't think the Chinese were benefit from the dollar being the hegemon. The Russians were benefiting from it. But then America decided they want to take over Russia, chop it up into small countries, and use those resources for whatever they want to. So they got China involved. But one of the problems they do is when they start building up China, China says, you know what? We're not going to let you build China on your model. We're going to build it on the Chinese model. And 2008, when the system that they had devised almost failed, the Chinese stepped in, saved the system because they were benefiting from it. But now America says, holy crap, China is too strong, we gotta go. So now Obama decides, you know what, we gotta go east and confront China. So they got out of the wars in the Middle East, which I'm gonna deal with in another video, and started what they call the pivot to confront China. Raising up Taiwan as a, what would I call it? A point that they can rally around to fight China. I hope you guys saw all of this. Many of you who haven't seen it, go back and read about it. Take your time, you know, when you sit down in the evening for 10 minutes or so, half an hour, look it up and see how things work. That's the way things work. One is built on another. Those times that the Bible talk about are eras or cycles. When things change. And we're in the midst of a change today that was created long ago. You build a foundation on somebody else's model. You knock down somebody's house. You knock down the four walls. Like I see in New York. New York City had rules that say that you have when you're going to build a house, you have to have permission. What the people from the Caribbean came to New York and started doing is they knocked down 3 walls and the roof and rebuild that house instead of having one single house. You have a house, a duplex with 3 apartments in each one. The foundation is still there. If the foundation is bad, faulty, guess what's going to happen? When the cracks start falling, the walls that you built are going to start cracking and falling. And that's the system you're in today. The walls are cracking and falling. And on the outside now, the Chinese build a different model. Build on their own foundation. The Russians are revamping now to rebuild their foundation and the walls of their house. They started with their military. And now, with the help of America, who forced them into a position of rebuilding their country, they're putting up new walls. Their whole economy is very revamped to be in Russian. They're creating things that's going to help Russia, systems that are going to help Russia, and not have to use American systems. That's the problem we are facing today. All right, I'll continue this in the next video. Peace. Have a great day wherever you are. Enjoy your day. Take a few minutes to relax. Don't worry about this. Well, I hope you have your plans to keep your money safe. I told you about diversifying. And then, boom, the market crashed. Anyway, I spent too much time on Africa instead of coming to this late. I came to this problem you're going to experience late, but I hope you had diversified and can survive whatever is going to come. Peace.